Howdy, and welcome to Young Earth Today, episode 2026. My third rock ain't old. Say hello to Spira, the friendly ammonite, our mascot for this episode. I could have named this episode, My Mom is a Victim of Cancel Culture, so let's start a protest movement and throw water balloons at a statue. Let me explain. Lawrence Hamilton is a sociology professor at the University of New Hampshire, and he did a survey funded by the NSF with questions like, was the moon landing fake? Is the Earth billions of years? Is it a flat Earth? Does the Earth go around the sun? Well, he might as well have asked questions like, is there really an Easter bunny? Do you believe in the White House? He's mixing chalk and cheese, and he's confusing empirical science with historical science. So, what we need to look at is kind of consider his argument. He has one reference in his paper to the deep time idea. It's from the U.S. National Park Service from 2018. It's just titled Age of the Earth. It gives one basic argument, meteorites. But here's the question. Are meteorites and old Earth's best friend? Gale, Arden, and Hutchinson, writing in Nature, said this: modern radiometric estimates of the age of the Earth are at present inseparably bound up with the classic works of Patterson and his colleagues on the isotopic composition of lead in the twilight phase of iron meteorites and bulk samples from chondritic meteorites, but is not widely appreciated outside the ranks of those who work directly in geochronology or meteoritics, that judged by modern standards, the meteorite lead-lead isochron is very poorly established. Anders has pointed out many times that the available evidence on uranium, thorium, and lead abundances in meteorites shows that the majority of measured chondrites, there is insufficient uranium and thorium to explain the observed development of radiogenic lead. This fact was recognized by Murphy and Patterson, who, in constructing the meteoritic lead-lead isochron, rejected most of the available data on this ground. Only 3 meteorites, Beardsley, Nuevo Laredo, and Richardson, are the lead and uranium data known to be in tolerable agreement. So, they are guilty of cherry-picking the data. Now, regarding the flat Earth, first step, we borrow Air Force One. We start at the North Pole, we travel to the South Pole, come back to the North Pole. We take a right turn, right angles. We start at the North Pole, go to the South Pole, come back to the North Pole. Then we take a trip to Ecuador, which is actually on the equator. So from Ecuador, we just track the equator all the way around until we come back to Ecuador. Now, you have 3 rings, all at right angles. You have a sphere. Case closed. So, the survey that Hamilton dealt with found that 70% of Gen Z holds that the Earth is billions of years old. Now, this was an online survey, so my mom's opinion was suppressed along with many other elderly. My mom uses a flip phone, so she was not included. So beam me up, Scotty. Her opinion is that she's not sure. I asked her, do you think the Earth is 4.5 billion years old? Her opinion would be in the middle. It wasn't counted. My mom did confidential work for the government in the 1950s. She could actually type 100 words a minute on a manual typewriter. So, my mom was left out on this thing. Now, compare Hamilton's research with an AP-GfK poll that was done in 2014, and it found that 18% say, I am not too confident that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. And there was another 18% that found that I am not at all confident that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and that would be what I would fall into. And that makes that there's 36% that actually doubt Old Earth Fallacies. So that's a pretty significant number. Now, what is my ideal survey? Here it is. How old is the Earth? 4,000 years? 6,000? 8,000? 10,000? More than 10,000 years old. You might laugh. at the 4,000. But do your own research, check it out. Sometime around New Year's Day, there were twits on Twitter from twits and tweets with something like this. Happy 2015. I can't believe the Earth is really that old. It kind of sounds wild, but check it out. And there it is. Now, I have something that's really ancient right here. 1959 Guide to the Natural History Museum of Chicago, 1959. Flip a few pages here. I'm on the Earth Science and Geology section, millions and millions of years, and talks about gems and dioramas and so forth, and millions of years. And here's my good friend the ichthyosaur there. And over here it talks about the Ice Age being 25,000 years ago. I don't know about that. According to the Delaware Indians, or the Lenape, they wrote the Wallamonum, or the Red Record, and it seems to describe a Ice Age. So I think the Ice Age was much more recent than 25,000 years ago. I highly recommend a new movie that just came out, Genesis Impact. That's Genesis Impact. It's an intense drama, and it deals with the intriguing question, are natural history museums telling the truth about origins? So, I've been to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles in 2015. I've been to the one at OU where I went to school, and I've been to the Smithsonian twice. That's where I saw my first moon rock. Now, are there scientists who apply their knowledge to the real world that actually are willing to buck up against the status quo? Well, consider Albert Engel. He was actually a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He studied at Princeton, and he was one of the top geology students, and learned about petrology and hydrology. Now, he is well known for his quote that says basically, we should be humble regarding our estimates of the age of the Earth. Speaking of Princeton, here is my math catalog from Princeton. Flip a few pages, and guess who we run into? Tesla. Let's go Tesla. So, Tesla said that Lord Rayleigh was an ideal man of science. Lord Rayleigh measured the salt going into the oceans, looked at the current rate and what's currently there, and came up with an estimate for the oceans of 30 to 50 million years old. That's a lot, but nowhere near of what the Darwinists would need. Now, there are many trace minerals you can look at in the ocean. They all point to a way younger ocean than what the standard models would accept. So if we look at nickel, a nickel is 25% nickel, and the rest is copper. And if we do look at nickel, look at the rate, and then look what's there now, we get about 8,200 years. But if we don't care if the fish die, we can bump that up to 1 million years. Now, if we assume it all went into manganese nodules, then you have a possible solution, but that takes 168,000 years, but not long enough. But the manganese nodules reminds us of my argument in my prior book, Is a Young Earth Possible? And manganese nodules can form like mats or layers, but you don't have nearly enough of these layers that would fall into a millions of years old ocean. So actually the manganese nodules is a very powerful argument for a young ocean. So the next time you spend 5 cents, remember young oceans, and of course Frank Sinatra, and that's my 5 cents worth on that topic. So next we're going to look at Yakov Anoka, who died in 2011, or 5771 in the Jewish calendar. He was a prominent scientist in solar energy, had 70 publications on that, and he had 56 patents, so no doziness there. He had some prime words to confront those who hold to Old Earth Fallacies. This is what Dr. Anoka said. All the dating methods are based on what is called uniformitarian assumption. Over the past 150 years, there has been heated controversy among geologists between the uniformitarian view and the catastrophic approach. The uniformitarian view can be summarized by its claim that the present is the key to the past. That is, only processes that we now observe, including their rates of action, are to be used to explain the geologic features. Such a viewpoint does not admit catastrophic events such as massive floods, asteroid impacts, or rapid movement of continents. The recent discoveries in geology discussed above, such as the Yucatan and Burckle impact craters, clearly do not fit into the uniformitarian paradigm. And yet, catastrophism now has a respectable place in the geologist's worldview, or episodic events. This acceptance is not as yet universal. In particular, the dating methods are still all based on uniformitarian principles. Amen to that. So, are you a catastrophist? Do you accept that there was a global catastrophe just thousands of years ago that destroyed the earth? So that's something that we need to consider. So, as Felix would say in the film Christmas in Connecticut, catastrophe. Anoka had 3 articles in the journal Bor Hatorah, including topics like continental drift, asteroid impacts, and radiometric dating. He put the dating methods in decreasing order of accuracy as tree rings, radiocarbon dating, which of course can be matched up to historical events, and other radiometric method. Now, speaking of tree rings, I got this recently. I didn't buy it in Indonesia, but it's from Indonesia. It's millions of years old. It said so on the ticket. So there we go. And actually, tree rings support the young Earth concept. And see my last episode on that. And that was Indonesia, not youth in Asia. And it looks great on both sides, and you can see the tree rings there. Now, this argument is detailed in my 2 prior books. So it's detailed both in Is a Young Earth Possible, as well as in Yes, Young Earth Science. The argument that tree rings in the fossil record actually supports a young Earth, which might be surprising to many. So, the philosophical question is, where do all these Old Earth fallacies come from? So I'd like to share some thoughts from Alex Martin, that's Marton. He had a paper in the journal Horus in 1985, that's Horus, and it was titled, What is Uniformitarianism and How Did It Get Here? He says, in the 18th century, the winds of democracy from America and the attacks of thinkers like Locke and Rousseau, among others, questioned the monarchy as the natural form of government. Liberalism was moving, and its method was to go after biblical geology, especially the flood, in order to disarm the monarchists. Incidents of popular unrest led the monarchist government to enact laws curtailing certain freedom. Free speech was one of them. There were those who smelled revolution in the air, but the liberal middle class could still remember the ravages of the French Revolution. That's not what they wanted. What they wanted was the reform of Parliament, but traditional theological doctrine stood in the way. There was only one way to reform Parliament, and that was to destroy Paley's natural theology. And the only way to do that was to discredit the catastrophist notions of the religious defenders who sought to reconcile the geological evidence with the story of Genesis. And notice how he concludes. The arguments against the occurrence of global catastrophe as the source of ancient stories about such events have carried the day, at least in part because of the historical influences on our interpretation of knowledge. After generations of formal education, the bedrock status of the view that ancient testimony of world disaster is not to be taken literally is so firmly ingrained in the sciences that alternative possibility is almost completely ignored. Yet we are faced with ancient history in which the principal memories of the race seem to involve the occurrence of world-shattering natural disaster. This is the real issue at hand here. How can we reconcile the traditional scientific conception of uniformitarian evolution with the obsession of the ancient mind that celestial catastrophe was the agent of change? In the description you'll find details on this episode. We appreciate your feedback, pro or con. Just go to our site, totalyouth.us. There's a contact button at the top. And please get our merch, shirts, mugs, and whatnots. Just totalyouth.us/merch. That's MERCH. We appreciate you checking that out. And be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Young Earth Today.